Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a real hold-up round when I put Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon against Michael Lehmann's Airheads. And man, this one was a really hard decision to pick because both of these movies are exceptional. So let's just dive right on in to the first one, Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon, which is based on a true story that happened in New York City in 1972. They give you all the backstory of it in the beginning and the end of the film when you need it. But essentially, it's about these two guys played by Al Pacino and John Cazale who hold up this bank. And what's beautiful about Dog Day Afternoon, the film opens with Amarina by Elton John, and it just shows kind of the, your typical summer day in New York, and then it leads into the Pacino and Cazale going to rob the bank. And, just as they go to rob this bank, it's just calamity after calamity, whether it's something with the employees, maybe they didn't check this or that, or just, just naturally, because like you can already tell from the get-go that these are not professionals. These are not people that do crime for a living. These are people that do crime now for a last resort, And another thing that's beautiful about Dog Day Afternoon is it just jumps right on into it. There's not a lot of exposition, there's not any exposition until like later on in the film when it becomes when the cops get involved and it becomes this major media circus. And Charles Durning is exceptional in the film too, as the hostage negotiator. That dude looks like he's about to have a coronary any minute, and he's eating that sandwich. It's real, like, there's just very bizarre moments that, Sidney Lumet kind of had that quality as a director. He would kind of put these weird little things in there that, it almost seems real, because a lot of the supporting actors in this film, like if you didn't know them from anything else, you would swear these were like real people that they just pulled off the street, where in reality, most of them were probably just New York stage actors and shit. But Al Pacino gives one of his best performances in this film. Like it's just insane, because like the whole reason why these guys hold up this bank is so Al Pacino can get a sex change operation for his boyfriend, played by Chris Sarandon, who's also brilliant in the film. But this doesn't come to light till about halfway through the film. And it's very advantageous for the filmmakers to do this, because it allows them to connect these characters with the audience. Because if you knew right off the bat, like if you started out showing, him, kind of showing Sonny's home life and all this shit and everything leading up to the bank robbery, it kind of loses its shock value, essentially. Because when you see Chris Sarandon get out of that car, the audience reaction in the fucking streets is basically how I can imagine the audience reaction in 1975, I believe, when this is 75 or 76, whenever this film came out. And seeing that, if you didn't know the story or anything, and Sidney Lumet does that for that specific reason, so you're not immediately saying, oh, get a load of the queer, that doesn't play in until the middle of the film. You're already invested in these characters, and that little detail doesn't matter, because you couldn't really be blatant. People kind of shut the shit down, but once that's revealed, you can see though, and watching Pacino's performance, it's done so in a way that it's not as big of a shock, seeing that the character's gay, because he does it, the whole mannerisms and everything, and just the way that he talks and everything, you can kind of see it, and like you can kind of get the sense that, like, and also we find out that he was a veteran in Vietnam, and he's also got he's got a wife and two kids, and his mother's his mother's like way too overbearing of him and stuff, and it's probably why he ends the father, and then he's like, why rob a bank when you got a sucker for a mother? And naturally this it doesn't go well for them. This film is like, it feels like a real movie, and like I said, this is Al Pacino's best performance, or one made it argument can definitely be made that it's his best performance. And and the whole energy of the film this is one of Sidney Lumet's best films. Like, it's very well done to be this kind of like true crime story, and make it as interesting as they did, you know, because even that ending, it's the suspense leading up to it, because there is this brief moment when they're at that airport, and there's just that delay as the plane's turning around. You really think, are they really gonna pull this off? And then, you know, this Sal gets shot in the head, and then they arrest Sonny, who ends up serving 20 years in a federal prison and for all that shit. And, you know, his wife and kids live on welfare, and then, you know, but I forget what his boyfriend's name was in the film, but he ends up becoming a woman and living in New York City. So, I mean, in a way, everything kind of works out on that end. But we move forward to something, you know, even crazier. Michael Lehmann's Airheads, which stars Brendan Fraser, who is the front man of a aspiring rock and roll band that also features Steve Buscemi and Adam Sandler, who play brothers in the film. And the thing about Airheads is it's just as perfectly cast as Dog Day Afternoon. Everybody in their roles is just crushing it. Joe Mantegna as the cynical radio DJ, Michael McKean as the shitty like a radio executive. Like, that guy is really good at playing sleazy and making it funny too. And fucking Michael Richards is fucking, you know, whatever. I forget what fucking part he plays, but he's in that doing fucking Die Hard shit. But like if Charlie Chaplin was doing it, you know, that shit's fucking hilarious. And, you know, the film itself is very funny all the way through. And in a way, they kind of do Dog Day Afternoon better than Dog Day Afternoon, because here, instead of, you know, a guy robbing a bank to pay for his boyfriend's sex change operation, these guys just decide to hold up a radio station so they'll play their demo, because he has bad luck passing it off to studio execs. One in particular played by Judd Nelson, who, like, Judd Nelson is one of the greatest actors of all time. Like, that dude's range is so brilliant that I feel like it's not talked about enough. You know, everybody just kind of remembers him from The Breakfast Club or maybe even New Jack City. But even in Airheads, like, he's playing that shit perfect, you know, sleazy and comical and all that good shit, you know. And you even got Chris Farley in one of his most, if not the most badass moment, when he rips that guy's nipple ring out of his fucking nipple after that dude rips the badge off of his uniform and stuff. And Ernie Hudson's in this, like, the action build up too, you know, because this becomes a media circus as well, because as they're taking control of the station, they've got it broadcasting over the radio. And of course, this forms a scene much in the same way as Dog Day Afternoon. Now, mind you, Dog Day Afternoon's based off of a true story. Airheads is not based off of a true story, but it is like a way more entertaining film than Dog Day Afternoon, because like I said, the action and the comedy in it is crazy. And they don't even have real guns. They're water pistols that look incredibly realistic, filled with hot sauce. And, you know, like when that fucking Michael McKean gets sprayed in the eyes, that shit's funny as hell. And they also got the guy that played Quado in Total Recall, that is the fucking like SWAT leader that's all just raring to go. Like, his wife's been getting nailed by a pool cleaner, and like Adam Sandler's a pool cleaner, and he loses his shit on that. And, you know, there's just a lot of funny nuances, and their band is called the Lone Rangers. That whole fucking bit right there, the whole, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, that's fucking hilarious. Like, that's just, Brendan Fraser plays that part so perfect. Like, he was really good at playing like the airhead type role, you know, and doing it in a way that's like charming, and like he had real like leading man quality, you know. And Steve Buscemi, one of the greatest actors of all time. That dude could do anything. He could do drama, he could do comedy, whatever the fuck you needed him to do. You know, he has a great voice too. And then Sandler's shit is fucking hilarious too. Like, his whole like just fucking, you know, cool boy, like not really much in the brain department and stuff. But it's just that this movie is just pure fun, and it ends perfectly too. Like, they fucking trash the fucking, they're still not taking any shit. They're gonna do shit their own way. They end up in prison, doing a live in prison album that fucking goes triple platinum, and like, they're gonna be a big deal, you know, because like sometimes you just gotta fucking do that shit. The crazy thing about Airheads is it's like fucking Dog Day Afternoon meets the King of Comedy, and it's fucking, it might be better than both of those fucking movies. And I know this is gonna be crazy, and motherfuckers may get mad about it. I mean, I may get a bunch of comments, hey, that's cool, and I know somebody's watching this shit, but this round's got to go to Airheads, because at the end of the day, the whole point of this psychotic obsession thing I got going on with the 70s versus the 90s is which movie is the better movie. Now, if we're going off a scale of the acting, I'd say it's about even. You know, because like I said, Al Pacino gives one of his greatest performances. John Cazale is exceptional in this film as usual. Just his whole, like, the way it's such a sensitive and brutal performance, you know, that only he could do. And of course, Charles Durning's great in it, and then, you know, but a lot of the side characters where they feel naturalistic, they don't really do much in the department of, like, say, what Airheads does. Airheads has a lot of layers that Dog Day Afternoon doesn't, and especially when Brendan Fraser is fighting with his girlfriend. For something that's scripted and totally fake, it feels more real than what, like, Pacino, when he's arguing with his wife and kids, and even when he's Leon, that's the name of the boyfriend, and when he's talking to Leon, and it just feels like, you know, we're gonna do some crazy improvised shit, and, you know, like throwing shit at the wall, see where it goes type thing. And whereas Airheads is really refined in it, you know, the comedic timing is impeccable, the action build up, you know, that climax of just, you know, Ernie Hudson saying fuck it, just let him go, and just like those people rushing the stage and just everything, just, you know, it's just a great fucking movie. So this round goes to Airheads. For anybody keeping score, that is 50-44. 70s are only up by 6 now. 90s take this round. And, you know, like, there's 2 in a row right there. The 90s, man, they can surprise you with shit like this. Because sometimes they could take shit that the 70s had done. You know, they give them the tools, they laid the foundation, and they fucking soar with it. You know, a journeyman director like Michael Lehmann, you know, it can really do, like, he can make solid, entertaining films. You know, as Sidney Lumet, you know, this is a guy that came up in television when it was in its infancy. You know, those pioneers like Frankenheimer and Robert Altman and Sam Peckinpah of that shit, and even Sidney Pollack and Steven Spielberg later on. The pioneers of television of, you know, the directors that started out in that shit. But he also did a lot of plays and shit, and it tends to get a little artsy-fartsy, I guess, so to speak. When you let an actor like Al Pacino just run, you know, that motherfucker is going to go a marathon. But Airheads, there's no complaints, you know, and I can probably list a few complaints for Dog Day Afternoon. You know, there's just elements of it where, you know, some shit probably could be better. You know, maybe lingered a little too long on a shot, but Airheads is lean. It's a lean, mean fighting machine, the laughing machine, more like it. You know, I laughed my ass off watching this film. Now, granted, you know, Dog Day Afternoon's not necessarily a comedy, but there's funny shit in it. And honestly, fucking Brendan Fraser yelling Rodney King is a lot better than fucking Al Pacino going, there, car. So, I mean, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. I mean, this is all up for debate. You know, I'm just one asshole with an opinion and a scientific obsession to see which decade is better, the 70s or the 90s when it comes to movies. And, you know, fuck, 70s are still up by 6, but, you know, the 90s might prove me wrong. I say it's the 70s, but we got a long way to go before we find that shit out.